Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the delay. We're now live streaming onto YouTube. Chairman, I'll hand the meeting over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the technical delay. Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting today, Thursday, the 11th of February, at about 10:05. You're all very welcome. So let's have a look at the menu, the agenda for today. So if we start with the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of December 2020. So starting on page 5, these are for accuracy only. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13.
Chairman, Councillor, sorry, John Plaskett has got his hand up.
Sorry, John Plaskett, you have a comment.
You promoted me there to a councillor. Thank you, Julie. So just a very minor typo on page 12, on the paragraph beginning on page 73 on table 3, line 3, it starts linked to back. It should say just linked back. So the word to needs to be deleted. Okay. Otherwise, I'm happy with the minutes.
Okay. So is everybody happy that that is a true and accurate record of the previous meeting? Lovely. Thank you very much. Actions arising. So item 2 on the agenda is actions arising from the minutes, if any, standing item. Any actions arising? No? Okay, so we move on to item 3, apologies. So do we have any apologies from the members of the committee? I haven't been notified of any.
Chairman, we have no apologies.
Lovely, thank you. At this point, I would just like to welcome everybody. We have some members who are not members of the meeting, of the committee rather, and you're all very welcome to the meeting. Obviously, you can't vote, but you are very welcome to speak. And if you just indicate, like any of the committee members, or on any item, then I will be very happy to take your intervention in order with everybody else. I am aware that there is a particular item on the agenda which is of interest to some members of the scrutiny committee, and that I think is item 13 on page 95 of your agendas. So what I propose to do, if that is okay, is to take item 13 after item 6 earlier on in the agenda. Is that something that members of the committee would be happy to do? Yes, fine, lovely. Okay, well that's done. Let's move on to item 4, urgent business. There is none, so we could move to item 5, declarations of interest. Does any member of the committee have a declaration of interest, an interest that they wish to declare that's not already declared on their register of interest? No?
No.
Okay, so item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. I've already covered that. As I said, you're very welcome. So if we now move to item 13, constitution call-in of officer non-key decisions, definition of a key decision, on page 95 of your agendas. And Mark Stinson, I believe do you have an introduction you wish to say?
Chairman, I think the portfolio that Councillor Suckett is going to introduce.
Councillor Sarah Suckett, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I think it's worth noting out that this report has already been heard at the Governance and Audit Committee and Overview and Scrutiny. And it is worth saying that this report is not being brought forward because there are any particular problems with the current process. I do feel, however, that it is worth having a discussion around whether we have the right balance between efficiency and member oversight when it comes to lower level and lower value officer decisions. So far as I'm aware, there have been no lower level officer decisions called in, and if there has, it would have been several years ago. The system we have means that every lower level officer decision that is published must wait for 5 working days before it can be implemented. Whilst I'm not aware of any significant problems caused by the 5-day delay, it is a delay nonetheless and worthy of our consideration as members. I think it's worth remembering that the current position we find ourselves in regarding call-in to lower level officer decisions wasn't adopted deliberately by the council. It came about by a combination of 2 things: the terminology used in our constitution and a change in the law. Our constitution refers to executive decisions without separately identifying officer decisions. And the law change intended to require the publication of officer decisions for reasons of transparency. However, the change in law did not require the call-in of lower level officer decisions. At a previous Governance and Audit Committee, a valid point was raised about the importance of clarifying the definition of a key decision. Our current definition of a key decision refers to it being 25% of the relevant budget. However, there is no clear indication as to which budget is relevant for use in that calculation. In some cases, it could be argued that the current value of a key decision may be higher than the figure proposed in the report. The report, therefore, proposes a fixed value for financial threshold. Officers looked at the range of values in neighbouring authorities, and a figure roughly in the middle of these has been selected. Again, there is a balance to be found between efficiency and oversight. The implications of a decision being defined as a key decision also impact the speed of decision making. We have to give advance public notice that a key decision is going to be made. This is 28 days before the decision is to be taken. Added to this will be the usual 5-day call-in period, with of course the additional 7 to 14 days should the decision be called in. The lower the figure that is set for a key decision, the more decisions that will fall into the category that will be delayed by the further 28-day period. This is for officer, portfolio holder, leader or cabinet decisions. I fully support the recommendations laid out before you in this report and believe that they will help to improve the council's efficiency and give clarity to the functions. Thank you. And we've got Mark, who will be here to help answer any of the more technical issues that have been identified in this report's journey so far. Thank you, Chair.
Mark, is there anything you wish to add at this stage?
Chairman, I think Councillor Suggett has covered that quite comprehensively. Only 1 or 2 minor additions that I would just make members aware of. First of all, there are also decisions which are classed as non-executive decisions. So they are officer decisions where the delegations come from council itself or from a committee of the council. So an example there would be planning applications that officers are authorised to determine. Because they are non-executive in nature, those decisions, whilst having to be published, are of course not subject to call-in. I would also point out that the power of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission to consider and review any matter, including a matter which may have been determined by an officer, still remains. The council call to action still remains in the Constitution. So this is really just about the issue around call-in, not about the issue around oversight and scrutiny. And finally, in terms of the figures that are set out in the table around the value of a key decision, you'll have noticed that the lower end of those is two neighbouring authorities where 100,000 is quoted. I would just point out that the £100,000 isn't necessarily the figure, because one of those says 100,000 or 10% of the relevant portfolio holder relevant portfolio budget, and the other says 100,000 unless it's already specified as a specific budget. So other than that, Chairman, nothing further to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I've got three people who've indicated who wish to speak. I've got Councillor Clark, then Councillor Kybird, and then Councillor Martin. So, Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Sarah, for your introduction, and to Mark for clarifying that. I think there are just two issues for anyone listening to this, and also I'm very interested to see the points put forward by the members of the Oversight and Scrutiny Commission. There are two things arising from what Mark was saying. One is that there's still the ability of the Scrutiny Committee to scrutinise any decision, but this distinction, if the call-in process is changed, and you can come back to when I've finished the question, Mark, I'm assuming therefore that would mean it would only be retrospective. So if we change the value or the criteria, you could still scrutinise something, but it wouldn't be able to be sort of, shall we say, halted for this period of 28 days. That's one particular issue. Obviously, you've got to have the criteria to decide what's a key decision or isn't a key decision. You could have an impact on a ward or two wards without necessarily having achieving the financial value. I said I'm not trying to put a spoke in the works, because I believe obviously we want an efficient authority. You could have, for example, unrelated decisions being made below the value. I'm not suggesting we're going to have any gaming in terms of things, 249,500 as opposed to 250. There obviously, for example, I'm aware in the last couple of years, we have delegated powers for the chief executive under the old constitution that Anna Graves exercised quite properly, as well as our asset manager. So although some of those things I'd call one thing in myself to scrutiny, that can be done as a matter of urgency and by decision with the leader and consultation with OSC. But in terms of ourselves, I'm also slightly, either Sarah or Mark can slightly clear up, it may be my confusion in the recommendations is, are we just changing the key decision threshold on call in simply on those things which are above 250k? So only those things would then be called in to scrutiny for, if you like, further scrutiny of the decision before it's actually implemented, and then we're leaving everything else as is. It might be my confusion, Chairman, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm happy to answer that. Unfortunately, it is a complex issue, so I'm not surprised that there may be a little bit of confusion around it. First of all, the Council Call to Action is an extensive power of scrutiny to review anything, including decisions. The difference here is that at the moment, with the call-in process, whilst Overview and Scrutiny Commission cannot change a decision, it can cause a decision to be paused for a period whilst it is debated at Overview and Scrutiny, and then the comments of Overview and Scrutiny are passed back to whichever part of the executive makes the decision. And of course, the decision maker must take into account those views in making a final decision. So the ability to review and scrutinise, and indeed to suggest a further change to the Constitution if members were unhappy, still exists. It's the ability to, what we're proposing in respect of lower level officer decisions, is that call-in doesn't apply, so you don't delay those smaller decisions. In respect of the definition of a key decision, you're quite right, Councillor Clark. It is more than just financial. So a key decision is classed as a decision which has a significant impact on two or more communities. So it can be a decision can be a key decision regardless of the financial value. But the law does specify that a key decision is both can either be due to the fact that it has a significant impact, or simply due to the value. And it's down to the council, each individual council, to identify a cut-off point for where that's appropriate. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, my fault. Councillor Kyburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we just be refreshed with the decision process that arrived at the £250,000 figure? And the second point is, key decisions do not include decisions made by full council, is my understanding. If those decisions adversely affected individual wards, would scrutiny still have the power to call those in?
Thank you, Chairman. The 250,000 suggested figure has not been determined. It's been brought before Governance and Audit, and then of course going on to council for that decision. But officers have suggested that figure, having looked at the figures that apply in neighbouring Norfolk authorities, and have put it basically in the middle of that range of figures. In terms of non-executive decisions, including decisions of the council or the council's committees, there is no power of calling. Calling only applies to executive decisions. So that's decisions of the lead of the portfolio holder, the cabinet, or an officer exercising a delegated authority which derives from one of those decision makers. But scrutiny has a very wide power to scrutinise. So a decision made by the council or one of its committees can be scrutinised, and Overview and Scrutiny Commission can submit its views and suggestions to a relevant body, but there isn't a power of call-in for non-executive decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. First, thank you for inviting members of OSC to attend today. That is very much appreciated, and to be able to speak. The minutes of the OSC meeting in October are not explicit as to the rationale. Forgive me, the answer phone is running at the moment and I don't know how to turn that off. The minutes of the OSC meeting in October that expressed the concerns are not explicit, and therefore I appreciate the opportunity this morning just to set out for the committee's information and understanding why it was that OSC came to a different view from the preceding Governance and Audit Committee. I think it's worth noting that it does seem a good idea for proposed constitutional amendments that affect another committee, for that committee to have the opportunity to review and comment on them in advance of it going to Governance and Audit, so that you have all the information before you when you consider the proposal. Second, that whilst procedurally this happened the wrong way round this time, it is quite understandable why your good selves came to one view and OSC to the other. The proposal before you is in essence the same as previously tabled, and when this was presented to OSC in October, the two reasons given for change were the current arrangement slows down decision making, and secondly, that with so many decisions being noted, then members, particularly newbies, poor dears, might not be able to determine which were important and which were not. So you may not be surprised to know that OSC members were not necessarily hugely impressed with the point as to whether or not they could actually distinguish between more important and less important decisions. Secondly, as was demonstrated last year, if there is a decision that is subject to call-in, then and the person making that decision or their manager takes a view that the urgency of it requires it to actually go through faster, and the 5-day delay would be an issue, or that call-in would be an issue, then as was demonstrated last year, an email to the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny setting that out gives the chairman the opportunity to waive that requirement for that decision. So at that meeting, it was certainly felt that especially as no examples were given as to how matters were being slowed up. And as we've heard today, matters at the moment, there are no examples of where decision making is actually being slowed up, and as a consequence, it was considered that that proposal didn't therefore stand. It was put to a vote within OSC. The vote was 8 in favour of rejection to 3 against, with 1 abstention. So it was a clear cross-committee decision, and hopefully that sets the context for your deliberations this morning. Just for clarity, OSC expressed no views as to the key decision definition. Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. It's obviously there's no question there, so I propose to move straight to Councillor Burt, who's also indicated a wish to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Sort of following on really from Councillor Martin's comments, the fact that we presented this initially by saying there are no problems with the current system and that there are no issues with delay, it does seem rather perverse to be making these changes which may have a public perception of trying to, if not hide the decision, hide the scrutiny of the decision. And it seems to be doing it that way rather than sort of being more open and transparent and allowing that, and especially since it doesn't actually have any consequence, as has already been defined. The difference between councillor call for action and call-in is somewhat more significant than I think is being indicated. Certainly the councillor call for action is a very wide-ranging, but this is all retrospective. The call-in, which is very rarely used, so I think it is being used responsibly. It's very rare to happen. I mean, it happened recently, and the 3 leaders of the opposition parties requested a call-in. I mean, this is not some sort of trivial, it's happening every week because just somebody's trying to be awkward. This is a very rare occurrence, and I think it is used properly. But it's important under those circumstances to delay decisions. So I think looking at the way that this is changing, the public perception is going to be on the wrong side, not viewing very well what the council is planning to do. But again, come over to the value that you've set. It does seem that if our neighbours are at the £100,000 mark, we ought to have a much more robust reason for going above that, again from this public perception point of view. I mean, just picking a midpoint of finding, so our neighbours are a bit lower, and then you can find somebody which is somewhat higher. Picking a midpoint doesn't seem to be a very good rationale to me.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. Mark Simpson, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's fair to say we've not identified any particular problems that have arisen due to the 5 clear working day delay. But nevertheless, there is a 5 working day delay, and we're talking about the lower value, lower level sorts of decisions. So on that basis, we felt, if nothing else, it was worth members giving consideration to the balance between efficiency and member oversight. So I completely understand that members will have a variety of views on that issue, and that's absolutely right. But it did seem to me to be, and to the portfolio holder, to be an appropriate matter for members to address their minds to. In terms of the value of a key decision, it wasn't simply a case of pegging it right in the middle. It seemed an appropriate point to peg it, bearing in mind that every decision which is classed as key decision has attached to it an inbuilt 28-day delay, and therefore classing too many decisions as a key decision will add significant delay to a number of those decisions. And as I mentioned earlier, the 100,000 isn't necessarily a straightforward 100,000. Two of our neighbouring authorities have set up 100,000 or something else which may be greater. Another authority that adjoins our boundary has got a 500,000 figure set, and another one pegs the decisions to the values that are set out in the EU procurement rules, which for supplies and services are in the upper 100,000s, 170,000, I think, something like 160,000. And of course, works contracts are in the millions. So I think, there is a broad range, and I think if you look across the country, there's a very broad range. So it appeared to be an appropriate figure, given the impact that it would likely have on a number of decisions. But of course, it's entirely for members to determine what they feel is appropriate in the circumstances. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say a couple of things. Firstly, I would like to agree with Councillor Martin and apologise that it appears that it should have really gone to overview scrutiny before coming to governance and audit. And I absolutely accept that, and which is why I'm very keen to see members of overview and scrutiny here today, and why the papers come back again. So I hope, even though that it wasn't an ideal, that we have actually come up with a solution that addresses the problem, and so we'll hopefully learn from that experience. So it won't happen again. So thank you very much for that. It's a point well made, Ian. So thanks for that. Secondly, I would like to say that in my time, we've always prided ourselves on being a member-run authority. And that is one of the reasons why Breckland is so different from all of the other authorities. We have been so much more entrepreneurial over the years, and why we have such a high level of income that isn't derived directly from taxation. So I do think that being fleet of foot is something that is important for a dynamic and commercial authority. That is perhaps less important if you're really just looking at the authority from an organisational bureaucracy. And I think Breckland, certainly in my experience, has been much more than that. And we are competing with decision making, certainly with our asset portfolio, with private companies who can make decisions at whichever speed they choose to make it. And I wouldn't want to put Breckland at a disadvantage in those sorts of situations. So, and I would also like to mention to the committee that these decisions executive decisions are made in conjunction with the cabinet member or by the cabinet member, who is an elected member of this authority and directly accountable to the electorate, as indeed are all board members and full council. So it's been very interesting listening to the debate, and I think it's quite right and proper that the item has come back here with the comments from overview and scrutiny. So, but I am minded to say personally, as a member, that I have not seen a compelling reason to change my opinion from when we first looked at this, and it was agreed unanimously by this committee. But I quite acknowledge that it should have come back, because I don't believe that the process was correct the first time around, and so I'm not denigrating its return in any way. I think it was absolutely right and proper that it came back to this committee. As I say, I'm just a member of this committee, so that's my personal opinion as a member. Is there any other members who wish to speak before we... Councillor Monument.
I've been looking back over the agenda papers to see exactly how it was presented to us. And I think the suggestion that there have been no problems in the past is perhaps an exaggeration if what I have in front of me on page 97 is true. 2.11 gives the current definition of a key decision, a decision which in relation to an executive function has a significant effect on communities in 2 or more wards of the council. We're all happy about that, I think, and or is likely to result in the authority incurring expenditure, generating income or making savings in any single financial year above the capital expenditure threshold or the revenue expenditure threshold currently laid down by the council. And it goes on to say, capital and revenue threshold currently agreed by the council is 25% of the relevant budget. However, this is causing practical problems because it is necessary for many potential decisions to be referred to the finance team for assessment. And the 25% of relevant budget is not defined. Is it 25% of total council budget, service budget, gross or net budget? I think that makes it quite clear that there are practical problems which are involving more work than would be involved if we have a figure. And it then goes on to say 2.13, it's felt the key decision threshold should be readily understood by officers, members and members of the public. And that's why we're trying to detail it. Fixing a figure isn't easy, but 2 of our neighbours go for 100,000, one goes for 500,000, and the others that they've looked at either go back to the sort of definition we've just had. One says any proposal with a cost in excess of 1% of the council's net revenue budget. Well, that's more accurate than the one we've got, which gives you 3 or 4 things it could be. And yes, one of them does go according to whether it falls within supply services or works contracts or something else. If we've got one figure and our figure would fall between the level 2 have taken and the level 1 has taken, so it looks as if it's in the right general area, we would have a definite figure to work on that everybody could say, yes, I know what the figure is, without having to go around the houses to get the finance department to weigh it up before they can do anything. I think it's worth trying. And the proposal is that we should do it and then review it in a year's time and see how it has worked. I support that suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Monument. I've been told that my audio was varying hugely, so I apologise if you didn't catch everything I said earlier on. But I've got Mark Stimpson and then I've got Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to apologise to members. I didn't make myself clear in terms of the issue that we haven't experienced any particular problems. I was discussing at that point the issue of the 5-day call-in period. Councillor Monument is quite right. There are some issues around the definition of a key decision. I certainly think that whatever members' views are on the operation of call-in in respect of lower value officer decisions, nevertheless, we do need some certainty around the value of a key decision, not only to reduce the administrative difficulties in assessing what that figure may be, but also so that members and members of the public have got some clarity and transparency. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief point, and thank you for that clarification, Mark. Everything is still going to be published. My suggestion to members of the Governance Audit Committee is if we were minded to approve the recommendations, might we consider a review after 6 months rather than 12 months? Obviously, it'd be up to those people who are on the OSC to review anything that happens within the whole area anyway, but that's just a proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
Is that a formal proposal, Councillor Clark?
Formal proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes. And do you have a seconder who's on the committee? Okay, well, thank you for your suggestion, Councillor Clark. Okay, I haven't had any other anybody else who's indicated a wish to speak, I propose to turn to the recommendations, which are on page 95 of your agendas. The first recommendation, which is badged A, call in for non-key officer decisions. Would all those on the committee who would support that recommendation please show?
Sorry, Chairman, before members vote, the wording of the recommendation is the members decide whether they wish to exclude. So I think you need a positive recommendation there, either that somebody needs to move either that we do exclude call-in and adopt the necessary amendments, or that we
okay,
don't.
well, sorry, that's as I undertook it to mean. So I propose then that recommendation A, that we decide to exclude call-in from non-key decisions. All those who support that recommendation, please show.
That's carried, Chairman. Oh,
okay. Well, I will go through it. Those against, so that members of the committee.
thank you.
And any abstentions? No. Well, that is duly passed.
Thank you.
So recommendation B, definition of a key decision, that the existing definition in the glossary of the Constitution be amended as laid out on page 95. All those in favour, please show. Anybody against? And any abstentions? And recommendation C, that the key decision figure be reassessed at the end of a 12-month period to enable members to consider whether the expenditure savings figure is still appropriate. All those in favour, please show. And those against? Thank you. So that all three recommendations are duly passed. I would like to thank the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for coming to the committee today and for their valuable and relevant contributions to the debate. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting should you wish. And if you wish to speak on other items, you'll be welcome to as well. So thank you very much. So I now propose that we turn to the next item, which is item 7, training standing item. Do we have anything for item 7? No. Okay, we now move to item 8, Breckland Council.
Chairman, Councillor Burt was indicating.
I do apologise, Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just after a little bit of feedback, please, because we there appear to be some delays in the training. The Agile Working training, which was scheduled for the 29th of January, got cancelled.
This is training specifically for the Governance and Audit Committee, not for the Council generally.
Oh, okay, all right. It was a general query on training and what was happening, but if you're, yeah, all right, fair enough.
Thank you very much. Sorry to cut across you there. So item 8, the Breckland Council annual audit letter for the year ending the 31st of March 2020. And I think we have got Mark. I did see him. Mark.
I am here. Good morning,
Mark
Chair.
Hodgson. Welcome. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, committee members. So the annual audit letter serves the purpose of being a summary of all the findings from the audit of 2019-20, but is a more public-facing document, so it's written in a slightly different way. So there are no new messages in it that have not been reported to this committee via our audit results report back in October, but merely summarises what happened after that when we signed our audit opinion in early November and then concluded the audit. So it will go on the council's website as the factual summary for the year, but as I say, has no new detail of which you are not aware as a committee, but clearly happy to take any questions.
Well, this is a large report. Members of the committee, or anybody who wishes to comment.
Councillor Kybird.
Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. Within the report, there's a note about IFR 16 leases and a comment that a substantial amount of work needs to be done. My question is really, when that work, does that need to be on our forward work programme to look at that? Thank you.
Okay, do we have any advice on that?
So Alison would comment on, I think, how the council's responding to our recommendation that you get on and do something. And then I guess the timing is for Alison and the committee.
Is Alison in the meeting?
Yes, she is.
Oh, Alison, sorry. Thank you. Is there anything you wish to comment on?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, IFRS 16 will be a big change for some councils, but actually for Breckland, it will have very little impact. We have very few leases because it only affects leases where we are leasing things ourselves rather than the commercial property we lease out. So I don't think there is any necessity to have a specific work programme for yourselves because it's quite a small piece of work for the council.
Councillor Kybird, is that satisfactory?
That's an entirely satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Thank you. John Plaskett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on IFRS 16, that's the second time this has been delayed, and I just wanted to confirm with Alison that we have got measures in place to fully document all the leases we have, because this has been discussed before, and I just want to be clear that we are in the process of fully documenting our leases. And a question for Mark. I noticed that we're changing the arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness. How do you see that, and what changes do you think that we need to make, you need to make, or we need to make? Thank you.
So Alison and then Mark.
Thank you. So yes, you're quite right. This has been around for a while. We have documented our leases about 3 times now. So we will document them again, ready for 2022 when it comes in.
And in terms of value for money, I think it's nuanced a little bit. So in the past, we've always covered the 3 key areas that are set out on that page, but we have not necessarily needed to report against them if our findings are positive. So if we've issued an unqualified conclusion, that has been our summary. The new requirement is to be, again, a bit more public facing and to have a summary of our findings against each of the 3 areas of the value for money criteria, irrespective of the outcome overall. So it's more narrative in our audit reporting for the public to understand what the council is doing in those 3 areas.
Thank you. Any Councillor Burt?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder whether, Mark, you could talk a little bit to the comment on page 31, where we're saying about governance, how the council makes informed decisions and properly manages risks. I'm just wondering how you're making these assessments, and perhaps I can cite an example going back some time so that I'm not treading on any confidential recent items, but our waste management contract, which was issued a year ago, the decisions that were made then, a lot of the documents came literally hours before the decisions were made. And certainly I asked the question whether we'd compared our contracts with the possibility of doing it in-house, and the answer was no, we hadn't assessed doing it in-house. And I'm wondering, when you see very, very quick decisions, or or things being rushed through like that, how that fits in well with being informed and managing risks.
Good question. So I think your example at its extreme would be something we would consider, but we are primarily interested in whether there are appropriate arrangements in place for governance and decisions per se, rather than specific individual examples. But if there was an individual example that illustrated an inappropriate arrangement, then clearly we would have review or scrutiny of it to underpin the conclusion that we come to. So I guess it's looking at it both ways. If we're aware of an instance where it looks like an arrangement might not have been adequate, then we may focus in on it. And equally, from the other side, looking at the overall arrangements that should be applied to all decisions or all judgments that the council has in place.
Thank you very much, Mark. I haven't had anybody else indicate a wish to speak on this matter. I'm not aware of a recommendation around this. Do we recommend this to full council, or are we just noting it?
I believe noting it.
Noting it. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
So consider the report duly noted by the committee. If we could now move on to the, oh, excuse me. It's always the way, isn't it? If we can now move on to item 9, self-assessment report on page 36 of the agenda. Do we have Faye with us?
Yeah, that's me. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Faye, there you are. So, right, over to you, Faye.
Good morning. So this is the first and final report from Internal Audit today for this meeting in relation to our Audit Committee self-assessment exercise. You may remember last year, before all of the craziness of COVID took hold, we had an offline discussion about the Audit Committee's performance, and I facilitated a session where we discussed the scoring and compared performance of the Governance and Audit Committee against the SIP for best practice. We agreed also in that meeting that we would do this exercise annually going forward. So that's why it's been brought back to you today. In terms of the recommendations, we actually felt that the committee actually felt that it was performing very well in all key areas in relation to this. So no further actions were added to the work programme as a result, which is very positive. I think it's worth bringing it back today just to consider if we need to add any additional information in the commentary section as part of Appendix 1 of the report, where we give an overall score. And secondly, just to consider how well the Governance and Audit Committee has been working due to the fact that the meetings are now online. So just really an update, a refresh of this document, just to make sure that it's up to date. And obviously, if any members have any suggestions that they want to raise for further action, I certainly think that I could amend the areas around follow-up and the strength of the committee this year, in particular in helping internal audit to move some of the recommendations through to completion, as they were starting to creep up a bit. So that was a very positive point that I think we need to reflect within the document. So and also anything to do with risk management, I think again the committee is very strong in that area. So just over to the members really, just to ask if they feel that we need to add anything in here before we refresh.
Okay, Faye, I think that's very helpful, and I'm glad to see it back here again. So I think that's very positive. We do need to look at it. What I would propose then is that we go through Appendix 1 a page at a time. Mm-hmm. So starting with page 39, and I would ask members if they wish to comment on that page, and then when we've dealt with that, we'll go on to the next page. I think there's only about 5 or so pages to do, so it shouldn't be inexhaustible. So if members, if you could turn to page 39 of your agendas and have a look, which is the beginning of Appendix 1, are there any comments or is anybody unhappy with any of the score or the answers on that page? So John Plaskett, and then Councillor Monument, and then Councillor Kybird.
Chairman, I just wanted to pick up on page 39. It talks about the committee's terms of reference. Have we actually seen those recently? Is it worth refreshing and sending those out to members, including me, to confirm that those terms of reference are relevant and accurate? Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, you're a full-blown member of the committee, John, so shouldn't there be anything sent to the members which doesn't include you as our independent person. Faye, any comment?
Yeah, I'm certainly not aware of any changes, but I certainly don't think it would do any harm at all to just circulate those to refresh everybody's memory in relation to responsibilities of the Governance and Audit Committee. So I will arrange for those to be circulated.
Thank you very much. Councillor Monument.
Just a small quibble. I went through these answers thoroughly and was quite happy with nearly all of them, but there's an answer to the one between 6 and 7, which rather surprised me, because that's a heading. It says functions of the committee, and it's got ticked. Now that rather makes it look as if we ticked every item and didn't even notice that that one doesn't qualify. So if it's possible to take that tick out, I think it would look better. But it may be that the way the thing's been set up, you can't go on until you've done something with it, in which case it's got to stay.
No, quite right. That needs to be removed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Monument. Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. Going to item 9 on here, has the Audit Committee considered the wider areas identified in SIPFA's position statement and whether it would be appropriate for the committee to undertake them? I would be hard pressed to tick the yes box on that. And I suggest that we need to do that as a formal piece of work on perhaps a biannual basis.
Thank you, Councillor. And we did discuss that at the last offline session. I believe from memory that I read those out. It's not a huge document and there isn't a huge amount of detail there in terms of additional responsibilities. But I can certainly circulate those as well within the document so you can see them. There isn't anything that the committee currently undertakes in terms of additional responsibilities, but that's not to say that you might wish to do so in the future. So again, I'll circulate that documentation and you can have a look over that. Any comments back to me and we'll figure out how we then respond to that with an action point.
And just for clarity's sake, that hasn't changed since we last reviewed it.
It hasn't, no.
No, okay. So all members have been cited on that. Fine. Mark Stinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to the question a moment or two ago about providing the terms of reference for this committee. Just wanted to remind all members and lay members that they are set out in the Council's Constitution. So a quick Google search for Breckland Council Constitution. Part 3 of that sets out the terms of reference of all of our committees, including this one.
Thank you very much. With no further comments, I propose we move on to page 40, items 11 to 20. And again, comments from members.
I can see no hands raised, Chairman.
I'll just give them a Councillor Monument.
Again, just a detail on item 12. It says has an effective audit committee structure and composition of the board been selected. We never use the word board. Does that mean committee? Or does it mean something else?
Yes, it does. It's just the SIP. This is directly taken from the SIPFA self-assessment questionnaire, so it will be in relation to those that do have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monument. Any other comments on page 40? Okay, we move to page 41, which is evaluating the effectiveness of the committee, and we take that one. Any comment?
I see no hands up, Chairman.
Okay, so we go to page 42.
John Plaskett.
John Plaskett.
Chairman, I've always been reluctant to suggest increasing the scores from 4 to 5, but having reread it and looking at the work we as a committee have done over the last 12 months on risk, we've challenged them and got the risk committee report changed, amended. I'm tempted to propose that on risk we could increase that 4 to 5, but otherwise I don't have any other changes I would like to propose.
Any other members? Comments? Well, I heartily endorse your comment there. We have done a lot of work on that, and we are self-assessing ourselves. So, has any member any objection to John Plaskett's proposal? Great. Okay, Faye, if we could amend that.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, and we now move to page 43. And any comments?
I see no hands up, Chairman.
Okay. And that is the end of Appendix 1. So in terms of our recommendations for this report, let me just go back to the beginning. That members note the attached checklists and ensure that it's an accurate reflection and update as appropriate. Are members happy that we have done that? Great. Okay, thank you for that. We then move on to Accounting Policies 2020 to 2021, item 10 on page 44 of your agendas. Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an annual report that we bring to you as good practice for you to have a look at the accounting policies that we'll be using for this year's statement of accounts. I'm afraid it's very unexciting in accounting terms this year because there are no changes at all because of the deferral again of IFRS 16 as we've mentioned earlier. So it's really as they were last year with just a few changes to years and dates. And there are some areas which will be updated as we complete the statement of accounts, such as useful lives, but that happens each year. There is on page 47, I just wanted to highlight that potentially that is an area that could change. We've got under collection fund how we calculate provisions for bad debts and appeals. And because this year has been so different to any other year, we're waiting until the end of March just to see if we need to change the amount of provision we set aside and potentially have a bit higher than usual for bad debts and that type of thing. But that would be communicated to you with the statement of accounts if it happened. So otherwise, happy to ask any questions.
So just on that, who would make that decision, Alison? Where does that sit?
So the decision would sit with us as finance using the evidence that we have at the time of the end of the year. So we'd use the evidence from our rating advisors on the amount of appeals. We'd look at market evidence. We'd look at our own collection percentages and see how well we were still collecting debt and the level of arrears and that type of thing. So it would be done by finance.
Lovely. Members, Councillor Monument, then John Plaskett, then Councillor Kybird.
If I can just ask for clarification on that, is that a matter more of maths than policy?
That's a very good question. It's it is a matter of maths, but we have to state the maths in the policies that we've used. So a bit of both.
John Plaskett.
Alison, just a couple of quick points. I did read through it in some detail as I had nothing better to do, but I just wonder, one of the things that crossed my mind is do we have or should we have a policy should the Bank of England move to negative interest rates? And the second point is on page 50, we talk about interest in companies and other entities. We don't mention South Holland Council, should we? I realise there's maybe a change in that respect in the future, but I just wonder why we don't mention South Holland. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, more good questions. So the negative interest rates, the policies will only relate to the current year up to the end of March. So currently we don't need a policy for that, but you're quite right. If things were to change in the future, then we may well need to at least mention that, even if we didn't have a policy. So yes, we'll keep that under review. On page 50, it's an interesting thing. Accounting policies, we only have to have a policy for material items, and the South Holland is treated more as a partnership working. So we reflect a lot within the statement of accounts in the notes, but we don't include it in a policy because it's not something that we have an interest in. It's more of a partnership working. But you're quite right, it should be commented on, and so we put that detail in the notes to the accounts themselves.
Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. In the background note 1.4 refers to changes may be made to these policies if necessary and reported to our June meeting. How do we assess what's necessary? We rely entirely on the finance department to determine that.
Thank you. Yes, you are relying on our professional judgment, a bit like the example I gave on the bad debt provisions. But anything that we change would have to be in line with the CIPFA Code of Practice. So anything that we did change would be in line with accounting rules.
I think my question, if anything was changed, it would be automatically reported to this committee. Is that the case?
Yes, so after today, if you agree to these policies, then we would obviously need to update you when we bring the draft set of accounts, if anything had changed, so that for your awareness, so that you would know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kyberd. Any other comments on this item? Councillor Morton, did you indicate? No? Okay, thank you. Well, the recommendation is that we review and agree the policies, given that they are the same as the ones that we agreed last year. Are all members happy for us to continue? Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to the next item, which is risk management policy, item 11 on page 57 of your agendas. Ryan, welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the committee for having me this morning. I'll just give a brief overview of this item, and then I'm obviously happy to take any questions. And Jason Cole, the Executive Manager of People and Innovation, is also here to take any questions you might have. The risk management policy is in need of renewal, so that's why this item's been brought here today. The current policy is seen as best practice by audit and was previously made in collaboration with governance and audit. We're currently in the process of recruiting a temporary framework manager role for the council. And essentially what I would like the committee to suggest to full council is that we extend the current policy a short period in order to allow for that framework manager to come in and look at it. As I said, I'm happy with how the risk framework is at the moment, but I wouldn't want us to pass a new framework for 18 months and then have the the framework manager come in and suggest any alterations to it. I'm obviously happy to take any questions from the committee if they have them.
If I could start, what is the time frame of the recruitment? When would what would we be if we agreed to your proposal, Ryan? What would be the time frame of us seeing this?
In terms of the recruitment to the post?
Well, for them to had time to comment, for it to come back for us to agree. What are we proposing?
So I am suggesting a 6-month extension. Me and Jason are committed to, if we don't get the framework manager in this time, looking at the framework ourselves and making sure that we're happy with it. As I said, broadly, I think me and Jason are both of the same mind that the policy is correct, but 6 months is what we'd be looking for at the moment.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Open to comments. Councillor Kyberd, then John Plaskett.
Chairman, thank you. I think the recommendation is sort of open-ended as regards time period. So I think the recommendation should be qualified to the extent that this is a temporary extension.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to make that alteration, Councillor.
So the recommendation is that we recommend this document to full council on the 25th of February. So are you proposing that we don't do that? I'm just a bit unsure what.
No, I just think we need to say it needs to be reviewed, say, by the end of September.
So we'd have a separate recommendation to this committee saying that we would like it back to have another look at it before the end of September.
Yeah, just looking at our work programme, we've got a 30th of September meeting, so maybe we should look at it at that meeting, and then so we should, from that meeting, update the policy for the ensuing full council meeting.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Let's. I think the point that Councillor Kyberd makes is a good one. So we'll agree the recommendation one as it stands, and then we will request that it come back to the meeting in September, and at that point, the committee in September will decide what it wants to do with what it sees then. I think that would probably be the most straightforward. John Plaskett.
Chairman, yeah, I was mindful when it said on page 57 that the council as external audit team as sees our policy as best practice, that's a good indication that we're in good shape. And on the basis, I think we've had difficulty recruiting to this post. I was concerned that maybe 6 months was not long enough, but that's really up to the committee to decide. There were a couple of minor typing errors on page 57, section 1.5, which perhaps needs correcting. There's two in there. And on page 68, there is a comment, where is it, which says, where an operational risk retains a high risk score, despite mitigation for 3 quarterly reporting periods, it will be escalated to become a strategic risk. I'm not clear in my mind whether that's ever happened, and do our internal auditors look through that as part of their process just to make sure that does happen? Thank you.
Faye, is that something you want to comment on?
Yes, we absolutely do. I don't know if you could cast your minds back to the previous internal audit review of risk management. There were some recommendations raised in that regard in ensuring that part of the process is followed in every instance. So certainly something that we look at during every review, and we need to incorporate in any future reviews.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to comment or has a question? Okay, so I think then what I propose, sorry, Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chairman, and bear with me as first time watching this. I just wanted to clarify why on point 1.2 we recognise the current policy as best practice, and yet we're immediately seeking to set up a whole new structure. If we're happy with what we've got and we can modify that, is that not sufficient?
Ryan.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. It's more that I wouldn't want us to extend this policy the 18 months we have to do it for, then bring in the performance manager who makes suggestions to it, and then have to bring an entirely new policy to get renewed. As I said, I'm broadly happy with it, but I just want to ensure that we give that opportunity to the performance framework manager when they come in.
Jason Cole, and then Councillor Kybird.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There's some operational opportunities that sit underneath that framework as well, along with software. And I think it's a really good time and opportunity to look at that, to make sure that we do embed best practice, which is there as well. But every year on year, we need to keep moving and raising the bar to make sure we don't stand still. So it's an opportunity to look at the operational elements that sit underneath the framework, as well as the framework itself. And there might be minor tweaks to the framework, which is great, but operationally underneath. So we use a system, for example, called Pentana, and there's definitely options there to get more out of that system, or maybe change that system. So we're asking that role to come in and look at it right the way from the statutory regulatory reporting all the way down to the data and the performance stats, and also data and stats, which is different to performance, that comes out that our managers can use to manage performance as well as those mandatory elements.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that clause 1.2, instead of it saying the current policy and best practice, it would have slightly enhanced meaning if said the policy is recognised as current best practice. It just kind of changes the emphasis.
Thank you, Councillor Kybird. It's not part of the recommendation. Councillor Monument.
I've been hunting through to see if I could find where we mention 18 months. And you have to go to the top of page 71, where it says, this is within the policy, where it says 19 reviews. The framework will be reviewed by the Governance and Audit Committee on an 18-month basis. So do we need to mention a proposed amendment to item 19 to say on this occasion, on an 18-month basis or sooner, if appropriate, or something of that sort. It's not that this ceases to exist at the end of 18 months or 6 months or something. It's only that we review it every 18 months, so it's still valid. But do we need to put something into item 19 to suggest we'll be reviewing it sooner this time round?
I think, Councillor Monument, you make an interesting point, but given that it's a general policy, I think we're asking for a specific review. So I think we could happy to leave it in, but include our request to see it at a particular time, which is in September. But I think it's an interesting point you raise. And once again, I'm very glad that you are part of this committee, because of your eye for detail adds an important element to the items that come before members. Councillor Jane James.
Thank you, Chair. Would it not be a simpler recommendation that we recommend that we defer the review until September? Everything is as it is, and that just makes it clear exactly where we're going. Thank you.
I'd be less happy with that, Councillor James, because we would then not have something in place. And it may be that when we look at it in September, that it is found to be entirely satisfactory. I am tempted, unless Ryan Pack disagrees with me on that, and I will defer to him.
I'm happy with either option, Chairman, but I do slightly agree with your comment that we could get to September and we're better to have something in place moving through than defer it.
Thank you. Councillor Monument again.
In that case, I think I'm on the same wavelength as you are, that if we take the motion as it is and agree what we've got, we then do a sort of supplementary bit that says, in this year, it is proposed to have an additional review 6 months from now. So or by the end, in September 2021.
And I would happy to second your recommendation there, Councillor Monument. So if there's no one else indicating a wish to speak, we have recommendation on page 57, plus a second recommendation as outlined by Councillor Monument. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we now move to item, let me just go over the page. Item 12, so Q3 strategic risk update on page 81 of your agendas. There's a lot of scrolling, isn't there? Okay, Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe Councillor Suggett's just going to do a brief introduction first.
Sorry, I apologise. We have the Cabinet member first.
You're fine. Thank you, Chairman. So since the committee last saw the risk report in December, there's been some minor changes relating to the strategic risks currently facing the council. But obviously, given the short time frame between reports, it's not surprising that the risks have not seen any significant change. You will see that the council's highest risk still remains to be COVID-19 related. However, there are still robust mitigations in place. These ensure that the council is still able to continue to operate and deliver the services throughout the pandemic. This risk will remain in place on the register whilst the pandemic is ongoing. It's also worth noting that since we last met, the council has outlined its financial plans for the upcoming year. So this has resulted in 2 of the financial risks being downgraded in terms of their immediate risk impact. And reasoning for this can be found in Appendix A of the report. And I'll pass over to Ryan now, who can cover off some specific changes and helps take any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. As Councillor Suggett's just outlined there, it has been a massive period since this report was last brought to the committee. So for there not to be a big change in some of the risks isn't too surprising. As she's outlined, 2 of the finance risks have changed, and the reasoning for that can be found in Appendix A next to them. The only other one that I wanted to raise was it was raised last time we were at this committee about the ICT cybersecurity risk and whether that was appropriately assessed. I've gone over, I've spoken to our head of ICT, I've spoken to our legal department and our finance department in relation to that risk. I've outlined in the comment why it has stayed there, because I'm happy with the assessment that's there at the moment. It should be noted that against our strategic risk matrix, that risk does fall into a category 5 on 2 areas, which I'll just briefly go into. One of those being financial. The reasoning for that is that the Information Commissioner can fine us up to £20 million. And the other one in relation to assets, that one is that in theory, the reason it would be a 5 rather than a 4 is that if someone did attack the council, there is the chance they could obviously disable IT equipment to the point where we would have to replace it. That being said, I'm still content that it meets the criteria to be a 4 rather than a 5, as all the other areas fall under a 4, and we haven't got essentially loads of control over how much the IOC can fine us. I'm more than happy to take any questions from any of the committee.
Thank you very
members
much.
In general, sorry.
Thank you very much. And we'll have Faye Hayward, and then I've got Councillor Monument.
Quick query from me. In terms of the 25 score, current score for the pandemic, notwithstanding obviously it is a very serious issue that we're dealing with at the moment and is having a huge impact on the council. If you refer to the scoring for likelihood and impact, can we say that it's almost certain that those impacts are all going to happen? I just think perhaps the 25 score is a little high in my opinion. But it may be more of a conversation for Ryan and Jason to discuss whether the scores come from originally. I'm not saying that COVID obviously isn't a huge risk that we're all facing at the moment and dealing with, but in terms of critical, I think we may have moved through that phase now.
Thank you, Faye. I'm more than happy to. So that risk is owned by our EMT. I'm more than happy to bring your comments to them and suggest that we relook at that risk and whether it's appropriate that it's still the 25.
Councillor Monument. Then John Plaskett.
At page 88, I just have a small query. This is critical breach of ICT security, the right-hand column, latest note. 3rd paragraph, the word missing, and I'd like to know which one it is. It says the team has also recently to roll out Doja cybersecurity training. Is that tried, decided to, or actually started?
Thank you, Councillor. Apologies for that. I believe they're in the process of rolling that out.
Thank you. I've got Sarah Suggett. Do you want to come in now, Councillor Suggett?
I was just going to clarify that the training is online for members to start. Just know that because I did mine over the weekend, so it is out. It's on the members page for anybody should they wish to spare some minutes and to complete theirs. It is there for us all to get started on. Thank you very much, Councillor Suggett. I've got John Plaskett and then Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought once again there's some very good notes on each strategic risk, and I'm grateful for that. I think there's been a big improvement over the last couple of issues. I am concerned, however, about the time drift on when the targets were expected to be met, and many are between 14 and 24 months delayed. And I think we need to be clear. What do we mean by target date? Do we refresh that? Or are we actually saying that some of these risks haven't met the target after 24 months, which is doesn't seem particularly acceptable? I could do with some clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plaskett. So just to go into that, we did raise at the last G&A that target dates are obviously something which the committee wants to look at more and to get refreshed. There were 3 risks, I think, which have had refreshed target dates, which I haven't included in the report. And apologies, I was supposed to bring this up in my introduction. Both the finance risks, we've managed to agree new target dates for April 2022, and the local plan risk also has a 2022 new target date. In terms of the old target dates on there, some of it is that some of the risks have met their target date, for example, the GDPR one, and then have subsequently gone up. That was specifically in response to the pandemic because there was an increased GDPR risk due to home working in the opinion of the relevant party there. I am in the process still of trying to get those target dates refreshed. Part of the issue is that saying a target date whilst we're in COVID, where some of these services are obviously going to have a knock-on impact later in the pandemic, has proved a little bit tricky. I would like to think that I can bring some new target dates refreshed in the report to you at your next meeting in the summer. But I do apologise that I did think we would have a more complete picture for this committee.
On the local plan, I mean, obviously we've had government legislation that's interfered with that and changed the goalposts there. So that is a reason why that hasn't met, because we've had a new challenge. But I think John Plaskett's quite right. So these are, and this was, I think, the key issue that came out of the last time we looked at these. So it would be good to nail this down. Any further comments, John? And then before I go to Councillor Burt.
Yeah, thank you. I just feel that on the target dates, it would be helpful, Ryan, if we, going forward, if we had the original target date when this became a strategic risk. And if you wanted to amend the target date, well, let's also in that column put down how many times that target has been missed and what the new target is, because I think we lose sight of how long a risk has been on that risk register. And I think it's important for the committee to understand what the risk is, what we originally said we would do to fix it, and what time scale and how many times we've had to change it for various reasons. I just feel that there's something missing in the way we're doing it at the moment. Thank you.
I'd endorse that. Is that something you could take away, Ryan?
Yeah, more than happy to take that away, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burt.
Thank you. I think I'm kind of coming along a similar theme here. Thank you very much for the detailed assessment on the ICT security, and that's useful. My query really is to do with the way in which we're making these assessments, and I appreciate that you said it's nuanced the impact on this. Although when we started, the original score was 25. And now we've managed to reduce the impact. And I appreciate that you're saying some aspects get you into the 5 and some get still in the 4, but it seems difficult to understand why we started at 5 and then it brings it down to 4 when ICT is becoming more and more pervasive and its importance is increasing overall. Now, the things that we can do, clearly we have more influence over the likelihood than the impact, and I'm wondering whether you've got with a target impact of 3, whether that's ever going to be achievable, and I wonder whether perhaps we need to be more indicating that perhaps accept that the consequences are severe, but we can do things to reduce that likelihood dramatically, and perhaps we could target a likelihood of 2, but accept that if we do fail, it's going to have a very high impact of, say, 5.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Burt. I'm more than happy to go and talk to the head of IT about the target in relation to your comment, because I think it is fair. I can bring that update to the next committee.
Thank you. Any other indications to speak on this item? No? Okay, thank you very much. So I think what our recommendation is, we have to agree this, don't we? Let me just find it on the...
It's just to note, Chairman.
To note. Okay, we're happy. We've noted that. Lovely. And we've got some specific action points there for the team on that. So we've already addressed item 13. So we have item 14, the work programme on page 103 of your agendas. Any comments on the forward work programme? Councillor Kybird and Julie Britton.
Chairman, we need to add the quarterly risk report updates to the appropriate meeting dates.
Julie Britton.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to mention that after the agenda was published, I've had a lot of reports through now to add to future meetings, so it will be updated and I can send that round for members to have a look at once it's been updated after the meeting.
Certainly, that would be helpful, and we'll take on Councillor Kybird's point as well. Alison Chubbuck.
Thank you. Yes, since this was issued a couple of days ago, we had a consultation launched from MHCLG about the timing of the accounts deadline and audit deadline for this year. So the proposal is that the accounts no longer have to be completed by the 31st of May. We have until the end of July. And the audit doesn't have to be completed by the end of September. It will be the end of December again. So I've met with EY this week, and we hope to have a plan next week on some draft timing. So I will need to change the dates that the accounts come to yourself for the draft version and also the audited version. So depending on what else is on the agendas, there is possible that your 29th of July meeting might not be needed.
Alison, is there any reason why we have to, why we couldn't just continue with the original timetable?
In terms of the audit change, we're obviously led by EY and their resource pressures. So there's not a great deal I can do about asking them to do it earlier than the end of December. In terms of the 31st of May deadline, then yes, we could still work to that. It would put some extra pressure on staff at the moment, potentially, or I could maybe take a middle point and we could aim to have the accounts done by the end of June and bring them to your July committee as draft, so that you can still get to see them relatively early.
What do members feel about that?
Chairman, I think Alison should assimilate all this latest data and tie in with Julie as to which meeting is most appropriate for rescheduling.
Thank you. John Plaskett, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to agree with Alison. Really, I think the end of June would be a really good idea. So we have plenty of time to then look at the draft accounts prior to EY getting involved with their audit.
Okay, Alison, as that was your suggestion, I'm assuming it is possible. Would you be happy to work to that timetable?
Yes, I'd be very happy to work to that timetable. And actually, EY have indicated that they won't start any audits before the start of July, so that fits very nicely.
Lovely. Okay, well, in that case, with that amendment, thank you for that. There's nothing else, I think, on the forward work plan. So we have completed the agenda. So unless anybody has anything they wish to add, I propose we close the meeting. No? Well, thank you all very much indeed for your attendance today. And I wish